Welcome to the 42nd Annual Sun and Fun International Convention and Fly-In here at the beautiful Lakeland Linder Regional Airport. I'm Ben Coleman, one of your hosts here at the Florida Aviation Network, and we are here on the this is the 42nd Annual. This is 2016. I am going to date it that way. Sorry, Obi, but it's. We have all sorts of folks that walk around this place. We have entertainers, we have politicians, we have students. We have all walks of life coming here, but we're all here for the same reason. We're here for aviation, love for aviation, and safety, because have an accident, something's gone wrong. And in doing that, we want to learn as much as we can to prevent accidents and to make these machines work, operate, fly like they're designed. And the only way to do that is with qualified people. And some of the qualified people, we've got to share that passion with some of the unqualified people and bring them up into this industry. And we have one of those gentlemen here with us today. We're going to talk about education and what we're doing here in Lakeland area to stimulate the aviation industry. Mr. Mike Zidziunas.
How you doing?
Zidziunas. There we go. Perfect. And that's and if you don't like to say Mike Zidziunas, it's Z.
Mike Z. Nobody knows my last name, and they can't. It doesn't pronounce like it's spelled. So.
Well, it's French, isn't it?
No, Lithuanian.
But Mike, it's we've come across each other many times. Back in my former career, FAA.
Yeah, you were working the FAA.
We were trying to help you, and we're always trying to help you because you always have something going on. And Mike, you've always had your finger on the pulse, stirring the stick, making things happen. You came up from South Florida, made Lakeland your home, primarily because Sun and Fun was here.
That's correct.
And that's what really kind of stimulated and threw you into the stream. And I got to say, you're right in the thick of it right now.
I am, yes. And, that is true.
What are you're wearing a Lakeland Aero Club, high school flying club. Tell me what a high school flying club does, and what your capacity is with those guys.
Well, we are fortunate to have the largest high school flying club in the world right here. Through the scholarship programs that Sun and Fun has, we've produced almost 50 private pilots, teenage private pilots, in the last 4 years. Well, those pilots need a place to call home, and we need to be able to build time affordably. And so the Lakeland Aero Club was formed. We currently own 4 aircraft. We just built a 12,500 square foot hangar clubhouse facility right inside the main gate at Sun and Fun, right with access to the grass runway. Lakeland Linder just put in a grass runway primarily for us. We're going to do glider operations so we can get some of the younger people into flying. And we're teaching in Cubs, we're teaching airmanship, and we're also teaching aircraft restoration. So the students of the Lakeland Aero Club spent 3 years restoring a Piper L-18C, which is a first generation Super Cub, military variant. The airplane was built in 1953 for the Turkish Air Force, and it went over to Turkey. And about 15 years ago, the Turkish Air Force retired all those planes, and Americans went over and bought them up, cheap Cubs, brought them back here, only to find out they couldn't get them. Well, they couldn't get them certified. They had to do them experimental, or they could make them meet the original type certificate, which is quite a process. And we're in a learning and teaching environment, so we chose to jump through the hoops and make the airplane meet its type certificate, which, the airplane's older than I am. And they had to go through, the students went through, cross-reference the part numbers from the original Piper manuals, found the STCs to replace parts that didn't exist anymore or weren't in production. And April 1st of last year, we got our first U.S. standard airworthiness certificate for that aircraft. Then the students flew it to Oshkosh. We went across the country, 5 antique airplanes, 5 teenage private pilots with 5 students who had soloed an airplane, and me as self-loading baggage.
Well, you were there more of the chaperone, kind of a
calm voice of reason, I like to call it. Yeah, got the credit cards. They wouldn't stray too far away.
That's good. And weather? Did weather give you any?
Always. Florida is the hardest state to get out of on the trip to Oshkosh in the summertime.
Always
All of our
pop up.
challenges are getting out of Florida. So the rest of the
Sunrise to
trips,
about 10 o'clock and you're golden.
you're good. And then after that, and when you're flying a Cub out of Lakeland, the sun, you just can't get to the Georgia border before the thunderstorm. So we usually get pinned down somewhere, Florida, southern Georgia, somewhere when the thunderstorms have all lit off. And all of that's a part of the learning process. First night, no matter what our best laid plans are to get to a place, haven't done it yet. And so, and that's part of it. You're going to fly cross country in a small airplane. You're going to get stuck in some little towns that are, well, off the beaten path.
It's a challenge, but and the kids, and I say kids, the age range, you're talking about 15, 16?
14 to 25
Okay.
is our club. And although 25 is the top age limit, after that, if they were already a member, they can continue being a member. They're a mentor member, but you can't join the club unless you're under 25. But now that we're getting our glider program launched, we're going to be encouraging the freshmen, the 14 and 15-year-olds, because they can solo a glider at 14. We're going to try to get them in the cockpit and excited about airplanes. Now that we've got this beautiful clubhouse, walking distance from the school, what we've created is the world that you and I grew up flying in. They can leave that school, walk through our headquarters, our clubhouse, and our hangar, out onto a grass field with a Cub sitting there or a glider sitting there and no black fence. It's not that the black fence isn't there, the world we live in, big TSA fence, but it goes off the sides of the building, so you don't see it. So we've kind of recreated it. That black fence has been a barrier. Kids can't hang out at the airport anymore. Well, we've created an environment that they can hang out at the airport and still meet the TSA requirements for security for airports.
Well, I tell you, it's so important, and there with the students on the high school level, and you know, hanging out at airports is really what it's all about. And Mike,
We don't outgrow it.
no, I'll never outgrow it. I refuse to grow up. I don't know about you, but light sport. I think you were very, very active, and probably still are in the light sport activity.
I am. I had learned to fly when I was 16, and I really couldn't afford to stay in general aviation, and I didn't find it as exciting. When the light sport rule came out, I thought it was very interesting. There were some interesting aircraft out there. They were a lot of fun to fly. They were supposed to be affordable. They weren't, but I was in a better place in my life, you know, monetarily, and got heavily involved in light sport. I'd done a lot of experimental. You and I worked when you were working for the FAA, hanging paper on some of the home builds I did. So I used that background and became a light sport repairman, and then I was the first person to use that experience to go on and get my A&P, and now I'm an A&P IA, and now I'm doing what I'm doing, teaching aircraft restoration to these students.
Great, and dope and fabric work, and there's a lot of people that say, well, that's old, that's outdated, don't need to teach it anymore, don't need to know anything about it. What do you say to that?
Well, as long as there's people like myself who love antique airplanes and spend an inordinate amount of money trying to keep these old birds flying. I mean, my airplanes are older than I am, and I don't even consider that I own them. I'm their current custodian and caretaker.
And you're going to pass them on.
I'm going to pass them on, and you know, 18-year-old Donovan Richards did his private pilot, his whole private pilot training and his check ride in my 1939 Tailorcraft, which he flew to Oshkosh, and so that airplane's going to be flying around 50 years from now. And the people who restore old airplanes, you know, we don't think about it as a value or as an investment. It's not. It's a love of this machine, and so there's always going to be a place for that. I mean, obviously, the way the world's going, the advances are composites in the technology, in the avionics, in the UAVs. That's obviously the cutting edge stuff. But there's a value added for the guy that restores old airplanes. Jerry Stadmiller doing the Stearman. That's all he does. He does Stearmans. And he does maybe 3 or 4 a year. And he's making a nice living, and he's doing beautiful work and keeping these beautiful old airplanes flying. And you walk out into vintage and you see these pristine airplanes. They weren't that nice when they were new.
No, they're better.
And they're better than they were when they're new. And those guys that are spending that money to do that, they're doing it out of love. And hopefully that never dies. And these young people learning to fly in Cubs, learning to fly in Cubs that are older than their parents, maybe even older than their grandparents, they're going to fall in love with those airplanes, and hopefully they'll become the custodians and caretakers of those lovely old airplanes in the future.
Well, that's a big responsibility that you're taking on when you take the young minds and try to mold them and squeeze them and push them. How much work is it? Because typically if a young man or young woman wants to be involved with aviation, they're hungry and they're wanting to get that information, knowledge out of you, rather than you having to try and shove it and cram it into them. There's a difference, a push or shove, or receive.
Lakeland Aero Club is entirely an after-school activity. So the young people who are there want to be there, and they're there working on their airplane. One of the things that makes our program successful is we gave them the planes. Those are their airplanes. They're not Sun and Fun's airplanes. They're not my airplane. It's their airplane. The only time I fly it is I'm checking somebody out in it. They fly it. They maintain it. They wipe it. Walk in that hangar later on, you'll see they're wiped down pristine, and they always are. There's great pride of ownership. And you put your hand on that Cub, there'll be 10 sets of eyes looking at you every move to make sure you're not going to hurt their baby. So yeah, it's a whole lot easier to teach somebody who wants to learn it. They're not being forced to take this class because somebody told them they had to take it or whatever. This is entirely an after-school thing.
There's a lot of eyes watching you guys, and there's the intent and want and desire to duplicate it. But some of these things are hard to duplicate because it's the personalities. Unless you can take the Mike Z out of Lakeland and replant him in Minot, South Dakota, Minot, North Dakota. I'm sorry, wrong. It's Pierre, South Dakota. Take Mike and put him in Pierre. It's hard to find a Mike Z in Pierre, but they're there. I mean, it might not be Mike Z, probably Mike C or D, but they're there. How do we find them, Mike?
That's a good question. I would say to anybody that's serious about wanting to help and be part of the solution, step yourself out of the picture. It can't be about you. It's got to be about them. You got to learn to listen a lot, and you got to kind of think back to how you felt when you were that age. And for me, it's easy. I never grew up, so everybody's like, "Why don't you grow up?" Well, it's a good thing I didn't, because
it's overrated.
Right. I wouldn't be able to do this job. I love listening to them. I love watching them come up with solutions. And the neat thing about them is, and I got to hear Louis Fig Newton.
Colonel.
Yes, he was
General
a
Newton,
general. He's a
General
general,
Newton,
and he was in charge of Air Force Training Command. And he said, with these young GIs, all you've got to do is tell them what you want done, when you want it done, and what you don't want broken, and then get out of the way. And you've got to be willing to do that. And it's amazing where these people will take you. These young people have taken me to places I can't even imagine, couldn't have imagined, couldn't have gotten there on my own. And I just shine the light, wind them up, point them in the right direction. And it's amazing the solutions they come up with. I show a little bit of faith in them, and they respond by performing. And they want to show off. They want to prove themselves. So let them.
Yeah.
Give them the opportunity. Don't lower the bar. Put the bar where it needs to be. We're working on airplanes. I can't lower the bar. We have to have a zero failure. That's our philosophy.
Mike, when you're taking these young folks and they're obviously learning the power of the certification, your stamp of approval, your signature, your promise that things have been done right. Takes a lot of integrity. People don't, price-wise, it's been kind of funny that folks have said, you make more money working for a car dealership being a mechanic, and you don't have nearly any of the responsibility that you do in aviation. When you stop and think about it, when you sign something off that you certify that it's been done to a standard, you got to know that that's for real. And teaching these young people, have you noticed that there's any hesitation or reservation to take that responsibility?
Actually, no. They're still at that young and immortal and brave and
10 foot tall and bulletproof.
And bulletproof.
Yeah.
And So usually I find myself pumping the brakes on it. Are we sure that's right? When we're in an environment where I can let them, if they're screwing it up, I can let them, and without anybody getting hurt or anything getting
They gotta
seriously
make
damaged,
mistakes.
I've got to let them.
That's part of
I let 'em.
learning.
It's a you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes, and that's really important. You have to get it right when it counts. Okay, and all of the missteps we make getting to that final stage, we have to learn from, not to put the wrenches on the airplane. They all know that. We don't set a wrench down anywhere on an airplane.
Goes back where it belongs.
Goes back where it belongs. It can go in your pocket, but it doesn't go in that airplane because it's going to stay in that airplane. And it's great because they kind of get on each other about it. You know, we've got kids with more experience. They're wanting to show off to their friends that they know this, and then the other guys are wanting to catch up to them so they can get to do what those guys are doing. And it's the group dynamic that makes it magic. I think, yeah, you could probably pull this off with 1 or 2, but having 10 working on an airplane is really something. Like we'll do, got 2 ailerons. Okay, you guys are going to do that aileron. You guys are going to do that aileron. It's not speed, it's accuracy. And I've watched them pull tapes off because the tapes weren't straight. I've watched, they get competitive, and we got 2 of the most perfect ailerons you've ever seen.
And you know what will be a real challenge is to have a group, different groups doing it, but they need to look alike.
Yes.
You know, as far as the dimensions.
Well, that's it. And they're back and forth, copying off of each other's paper.
Cool.
Because so we don't want this airplane to have a heavy wing. So you guys need to, you're doing 2 teams and you're both trying to do this job, but they're going on the same airplane. So.
Mike, I can't thank you enough for your time because I know that you're like a water bug here on top of the water at Sun and Fun. But and I know you've got a lot left to do as we get on looking into the week. Thank you for all that you do for us here in the industry, and I want to come over and take a look at some of your handiwork.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I invite anybody to come out. We're right inside the main gate. Can't miss it. 12,500 square foot building with a great big Lakeland Aero Club logo on it, and the doors are open, and everyone's welcome to come check it out.
And you can eat off the floor.
Just about.
And congratulations on your regional award.
Oh, thank you.
Southern Region, I guess you're A&P.
Yep.
Maintenance Tech
Yes,
of the
sir.
Year.
Yep.
Well, let's send you to National.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
And again, we're going to wrap it up on this interview, and we'll see you on the next one.